Hi, welcome to my channel where we provide an alternative view to the common narrative. Today I'm going to talk about actually three topics because none of them are actually long enough to make a single video of them. So the topic is the downing of the American Reaper drone. Poland and Slovakia are going to provide Ukraine with some MiG-29s. And then we're going to talk about the rescue of Credit Suisse Bank. So if you are interested, please continue watching. Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today, as I've stated, we're going to talk about three short subjects which I thought would be of interest. And the first one is the recent downing of the MQ-9 Reaper drone by the Russians over the Black Sea on the March of the 14th. Well, it's about now 6 days gone. And you probably read some information of that over the phone. But if you look at the details, the Reaper drone has been flying for some time, or probably from the start of the SMO in the Black Sea. And they have tried to gather information on the Russian fleet, as well as on the Sevastopol harbor in Crimea. And, well, there are some allocations they will look at the Russian troop movement, but I don't think that they can look that far. As far as I understand, they were usually at a radius about 100 kilometers away from Crimea. But they did observe the Russian fleet. And we know that the Moscow vessel has sunk. We know of numerous attacks on Sevastopol itself by Ukrainian drones. And we also know about the Kerch Bridge bombing. And I believe that the Reaper drones were in the air at that time and facilitated these type of operations. Now, the Russians have always been very cautious. They, like I said, they had a special military operation in Ukraine. They didn't want to escalate it. They would like to have a quick resolution to the conflict. But it doesn't seem to me that they were successful in that aspect. And about recently, I've talked about this, Putin's speech that basically finally drew the proverbial line in the sand and said no more. And not long after that, China had a similar statements that they said no more. And I believe that this action by the Russians on the Reaper drone was the Americans tried their luck and the Russians said no more. And they tried to bring the Reaper drone down. Now, they could have done it by an air-to-air missile, but that would have been very, very destructive and a very powerful or dangerous maneuver that might have escalated with the Americans, which the Russians tried to prevent. And just for sakes, and that's why they tried to bring it down by a different means. They tried to basically spray the Reaper drone with fuel and thereby change the aerodynamics, and thereby hopefully would have brought the aircraft or the drone down, and hopefully they could have recovered some of the wreckage and then reverse engineer or understand how the system worked. Now, just for the sakes, I believe in 2014 or 16, no, I'm not sure about the dates. Like I said, I'm very bad with dates. There was a British Navy ship in the Black Sea, and it was approaching Crimea dangerously. Now, if you are an aggressive person, you would have said that the Russian Navy should have sunk that British ship by a missile. But using a missile would have been an act of war. So what did the Russians do? Well, they rammed the British ship. after several warnings. So that is a little bit more subtle way of making your point. And I believe that's why the Russians also didn't shoot it down. But just for the sake, before they actually started with this fuel effort, they warned this drone, or they flew past this drone 18 times. So, and the Americans didn't react. The Americans thought, oh well, we are international waters, and we can do what we want, and the Russians won't shoot us down. And then that's what their big mistake was. But if you look at the map, since the special military operation, actually before that, the Russians have declared a sort of a no-fly zone around Crimea due to military concerns. And basically that was an extension of the normal restrictive flight zones. And this Reaper was about 40 kilometers from Crimea, and it was inside this restrictive zone. So although America didn't recognize this restrictive zone, that's where they made the mistake, because the Russians believed it, and that is why they acted. Just for the sakes, you know, when we watch pictures of this Reaper drone, and if we think about drones, we usually think about smaller sizes. And if I had to think about physically before I actually read the dimensions of this drone, I would have thought maybe 4 meters length and so on, and then the proportional goes what? Well, that's actually wrong. The Reaper drone is 11 meters long, and the wingspan is about 22 meters. So each wing is about 11 meters long. And so this Reaper is quite a big thing aircraft, and it's as big as an A-10 Thunderbolt 2. So that makes it a fairly big it's not a drone anymore. It's a remote-driven aircraft. And this thing can carry about 16 Hellfire missiles, equivalent to an Apache helicopter. So this is no small thing that can fly. The next time, if you see a Reaper drone, think about 20 from one tip of the wing to another tip of the wing, 22 meters, and the length is 11 meters. Now, as usually, we have the usual culprits in America, the Lindsey Graham, who were calling for an escalation, and America must now shoot down Russian aircraft and etc., etc. But typically, as the big idiot that he is, one shouldn't put too much into that. It's like the big dog barking, you know, or the small dog barking with no bite. So if they thought that this downing of the drone would escalate, and I'm sorry to disappoint you, that's not going to happen. America is not going to start the Third World War with Russia because the drone was shot down. Just remember also initially, I think in 2015, when Russia started to assist Syria, and where the Turkish aircraft shot down a Russian aircraft. I mean, Putin didn't declare war against Turkey. No, he asked for compensation and for diplomatic concessions and whatever. And at that stage, the whole matter was de-escalated, which is the grown-up type of version that one would expect. But like I said, this is again drawing the line in the sand, no more, and Russia has made their point. So we come to the second subject, and that is Poland and Slovakia are going to provide Ukraine with MiG-29s. The funny thing is actually that Slovakia, they're going to supply them with their MiG-29s, but the Slovakian military doesn't use their MiG-29s. They're all mothballed. They're not really operational. But what they will do is, apparently, they're going to deliver these aircrafts. So let me just get the facts right. they're going to deliver 10 MiGs with engines and then 3 aircrafts without engines. So in total, they're going to supply them with 13 airframes and 10 engines. So let's see how long that will last. But like I said, none of them are operational. None of them are actually flown. So Slovakia is actually getting rid of their, again, like all the other countries, their old armament that is basically scrap. And in exchange for that, Slovakia is going to get $212 million for the scrap. Now, that's not a bad bargain. Poland, on the other side, is also going to send about a dozen of their MiGs, but they have clearly stated that these MiGs are still being flown by the Polish Air Force, but they are in their last year of operation. So from next year on, 2024, they will probably be grounded, and that's it. Well, why let this aircraft be scrapped and grounded if you can fly it into Ukraine and let it be shot at by the Russian missiles? And that is how the Poland argues. So Poland has done similar stuff with their T-70s. They have given Ukraine about half of them. I think they were planning on providing them with more tanks. And in exchange for these tanks, they want from German replacement Leopard 2 tanks. And because Poland is now giving these MiG-29s to Ukraine, they probably want F-16s from America. So what it basically means is that, so you give away your scrap, your old stuff, and then as a replacement, you get all the newer stuff. And for me, this is nothing more like a big scam. It's a money-making scam. And unfortunately, money-making scam is leading to the death of people. So it seems to me these people have no moral conscience or moral values. Because what they are doing is they're just changing scrap for money, and people die. Well, it's still not clear how they're going to transfer these aircraft, because if they fly it from Poland to Ukraine, then they become part of the war. But I've read an article a couple of weeks back, maybe a couple of months back, that aircraft have already, old Soviet-era aircraft have already been delivered to Ukraine, but they have been transported in terms of spare parts. So basically, whoever gave them those aircrafts stripped them down into wing section, fuselage sections, put them onto a truck, then drove the truck into Ukraine, and then reassembled these aircrafts then somewhere in Ukraine, and then they became operational. So I believe it will be more or less the same. And, well, let's see. Both of Ukraine and Russia said that the addition of about 26 MiG-29s won't make a huge difference. And the Ukrainians are insisting they want F-16s. They are usually looking for multi-role aircrafts, means fighters, bombers, and so on. Well, even if they get the F-16, they're not going to make a big difference. So this was a fairly interesting article. But again, just for the sakes, the Americans, okay, they've given Ukraine about $120 billion. But of this $120 billion, only about $30 billion have been armament. More or less 30. So sending all their old junk, even some of their newer stuff, but probably the first version of their newer stuff, like that, what's it, 119 self-propelled artillery piece, probably some of the first versions. If they send M1A1, and there's also going to be some of the first versions. A lot of the old missiles and air defenses was given, old stuff. So basically the scrap. But it was still firing, and like I said, a T-55 tank is a T-55 tank is a tank. A tank that can shoot around, and that is basically a mobile artillery piece. Maybe smaller than a 155, hey, but a tank HE round can kill people, and that is all that is required. But now Pentagon has asked for the money to replace these old weapons. And guess what? They are not asking for 30 billion. That is the supposed value that was given to the Ukrainians. No. They are asking for 300 billion to replace those systems. So think about this. So you give your old car back. I'm going to have a car that is 20 years old. I don't drive it. It's parked in my backyard. You are looking for a car. I give you the car because it would have cost me a tow to tow it to the scrapyard. So instead of towing it to the scrapyard, you can have it. So you come and you go and fetch it. And then you drive away, and it costs me actually, say, $10 or so. But now I want a new car and a replacement, but I don't get a car for $10. So now I want a car for 50 grand to replace a $10 car, which was actually scrap. And this is how the Americans are going. This is how they are wasting the taxpayers' money. And that's why they're fooling the population. And, well, that's a good scam, isn't it? So we come to our third subject, and that is the rescue of the Credit Suisse bank. So we talked about it last time, and about SVB Bank, Silicon Valley Bank, America that went belly up, and then the two other banks as well. And two of them were liquidated and so on. But that was showing you the underlying problem with investments in bonds, interest rates, inflation, the dropping of the value of the bonds, and a slowdown in economic activities, which will lead to the withdrawal of reserve funds and funds in the bank, which is not a bank run per se, but it's a reduction in the business of that bank. And we all know that, should have heard by now, that Credit Suisse Bank in Switzerland, the second largest bank in Switzerland, has a similar problem, and they've been warning. This bank has been warning, I think, for the last 6 months, 4 or 5 months that I've started to read it, and so on. But the SVB Bank in America has now alleviated or aggravated the position of Credit Suisse, and the Swiss authorities have to say they have to stop the banking crash or a banking run on the other banks. And what they have done is they have agreed with Switzerland's biggest bank, that is UBS, to take over Credit Suisse. And for that, so they can rescue basically the Credit Suisse shareholders, but especially the depositors' money. And it will protect the rest of the Swiss bank. Now, I'm not totally so sure about this, because at the end of the day, it doesn't solve the problem. The problem is interest rates, bond values, inflation, reduction in economic activity, and these things are not going away. So who says that UBS is even in the same or a better position than Credit Suisse? Because at the end of the day, this deal says that UBS agreed on Sunday to pay 3 billion Swiss francs, which is about $3.2 billion, in stock to acquire Credit Suisse. So they are going to exchange stock, which they're going to create out of nothing, and then look at the market share of each, not market share, but market price of each share, and that is what they're going to give to Credit Suisse shareholders. And then they're going to give a government guarantee. The government's going to give them a guarantee of about 100 billion francs. 3 billion stock they're going to give, but they're going to receive 100 billion francs in loan to improve the liquidity of this bank. And basically what it says also, the share swap or the share issuing is going to be one UBS share for 22.5 shares of Credit Suisse, which is about half the market price. So the shareholders of Credit Suisse is going to get more or less half of the investment they're going to get back, but in the form of shares in UBS. So if they owned 100 shares in Credit Suisse, they're going to own 50 shares in, not 50, 5 shares in UBS. Oh, sorry, yeah, yeah, got the zero along. Any guess, that is what they're going to get. So that's a huge problem. But what is more even concerning is that the UBS has to absorb $5.4 billion worth of losses. So when they take over the company with a bank account with $5.4 billion in the red. So now UBS sits with a debt, an additional debt of $5.4 billion. That is bad, in my opinion. So you buy an asset. It's like I buy your car for $10, but you still owe on that car $5,000 to your bank. So when I buy your car, I still have to pay the $5,000. Your car is not value. Has no value for $10,000 or $5,000. You only the car of your value. The value of your car is only $10. So I'll pay you the $10. But when I get your car, I get the responsibility to pay another $5,000 to the bank, your loan that you still have to pay back. So I'm actually buying a loss. And if I was zero, I would have gone immediately into a negative red balance, into debt. That is what UBS are buying. Against the backdrop of high inflation, low high interest rates, low bond values, economic slowdown. And we're not talking about even the effect of the Ukrainian war, gas shortages. We're not even talking about that. We're just talking about simple economic indicators. So unless UBS is incredibly strong and didn't make the same mistakes that Credit Suisse has done, then they're also it's going to take a matter of time and they're also going to be in trouble. And what makes you think that the management of UBS had made any other decisions than Credit Suisse? Have they also invested most of their money into bonds, or have they more diversified their investment portfolios? We don't know about that. But economic chaos is coming. And I can't remember now this other guy's name. He was on a show, one of these pro-Russian ones. I'm not going to name that. He was a derivative trader for about 20 years in Monaco. He's now in China. But he says he expects between 250 and 300 banks that also have to fold. And if you look at in America and so on, there are more banks falling, smaller banks, local banks, which we don't hear much about. But there are already signs that these banks are also going to be sacrificed, that they are under stress, and probably will be sacrificed in order to save the bigger banks. So there's a storm coming, and we are only feeling the first low wave. Let's see what the rest of the year brings us. Anyway, guys, that's my story for today. I'm not going to say the rigmarole that I always say. So until next time, cheers.